Welcome to HDS 104, Expansion of Europe 15th to 17th century. Study Section 1, Europe on the Eve of Expansion. Introduction. In this study section, you will learn about the expansion of Europeans to other lands. This section discusses extensively on the economic and political developments in Europe that disposed European states and people to embark on an outwards expansion to either to unknown lands. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to describe how Portugal, Spain, Holland, France, and England championed the cause of European expansion in the 13th and 17th century. Feudalism, the dominant social system in medieval Europe in which the nobility held lands from the crown in exchange for military service, and vassals were in turn tenants of the nobles, while the peasants, villeins or serfs, were obliged to live on their lord's land and give him homage, labor, and a share of the produce notionally in exchange for military protection. Reconnaissance. This is a military observation of a region to locate an enemy or ascertain strategic feature. Conceptualizing expansion of Europe. By the term expansion in this course, we are referring to the expansion in knowledge of the Europeans about the existence of other habitable parts of the globe, either to or unknown to them. The exercise of influence and eventually colonization of these discovered areas. The effort at effective occupation of the newly discovered lands in order to maximize the gains of discovery. The perspective of the spread of European culture to other lands. 5 nations stood out that were involved in the expansion of Europe between the 15th and 17th centuries. They are Portugal, Spain, Holland, France, and England. Among the areas covered are Africa, Asia, North America, the West Indies, South America, and the Far East. Situation in Europe by 15th century. The period 15th to 17th century focuses on the era during which the foundation for European domination over other parts of the world was laid. Before the 15th century, Europeans had little or no knowledge about certain areas that they eventually traveled to trading and conquering the inhabitants of these areas, or so strongly influencing the people's way of life. By the 11th century, Europe had already developed trading links with the Orient carried out through maritime and inland routes. In this trade, the Mediterranean was the highway which linked different inland routes with services of middlemen. In 1300 AD, Europe began to face economic difficulties arising from bad climates and accompanying drop in agricultural production. There was also the growing cost of prosecuting wars of expansion and internal consolidation, which were rampant during this period. The financial burden for these wars largely fell on the peasants, who over time became overstretched and financially exhausted. This situation generated what has been transferred to as the crisis of feudalism, a situation in which the peasantry in Europe has been subjected to the highest form of exploitation and taxation, such that nothing more could be done to further extract any financial resources from them. It therefore became apparent that the ruling class had to look elsewhere in the search for an alternative solution. The way out of this economic malady, it was felt, lay in the discovery of new frontiers for the purpose of generating additional surpluses, either in form of agricultural products or articles of trade such as gold and silver. This panacea to Europe's economic crisis met the seizing and redistributing of resources available beyond the frontiers of Europe. Achieving this would necessarily have to be by force, and this would logically mean an increase in the production of instruments of war and the training of soldiers and sailors. It will also require the financing and maintenance of military operations outside Europe. The last solution was not possible because most European states had been weakened by the earlier series of wars embarked upon while consolidating their states. Moreover, Europe faced the threat of the Muslims who had fallen under the leadership of the Ottoman Turk, then championing the cause of expanding the frontier of Islam. Therefore, apart from the almost economic amputation of the Orient from Europe, there was also a religious and political dimensions to dual threats posed by the followers of Muhammad of faith. The reemergence of Muslims was regarded as a contribution of an ongoing process of military and religious rivalry between Christian Europe and the Muslim, for which several crusades has already been fought. Study section summary. In Unit 1, you have learned that Europe at the beginning of the 14th century largely looked inwards as agricultural communities, and those who look outwards did so largely for trading purposes with their immediate neighbors. With the passage of the time, the profit motive in many merchants increased, and it became necessary to look for other sources of wealth outside their frontiers. In attempting to tap the resources of the yet undiscovered land of riches, the capital of financiers and the political backing of the state were required. While the finance was largely provided by the merchant class, the nobility and the crown provided the political coverage. The government of these countries initially authorized these expansions, later encouraged and subsequently sought to control them, due perhaps to the profit that was supposedly accruing from the explorations.